Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. From the right, I'm Gary Polland.
And from the left, I'm David Jones.
Tonight we welcome two esteemed guests, Dr. Richard Murray, political science professor at the University of Houston, and Dr. Bob Stein, political science professor at Rice University. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. In the interest of full disclosure, I may have taken a class from this gentleman, Mr. Murray.
But what kind of grade did he give you, David? That'd be my question. Or what did you earn?
You know,
probably a C. Yeah.
I was probably a B student, but I mean, I'm not even convinced. It was too long ago, Dick. I don't know. Do you remember?
No, I remember the former county judge. I'm still waiting for his incomplete paper from the 1978 Houston politics class, but so far Robert Eccles hasn't gotten in touch with me.
Bob Stein, do you have any embarrassing things that you would like to tell us about?
Many embarrassing things, but I don't think I'll tell them tonight. At least not tonight.
Okay, my first question is, you're both in academia, but you're involved in politics, and tonight we're going to be talking about Politics 2010, what we think is going to happen. But first I want to hear, Dr. Murray, what are you teaching this semester at University of Houston?
Just finished up a course on Houston politics. We were looking at the elections locally, and I'm teaching a course on political parties. So both junior, senior classes, combined enrollment of about 55 students.
Are you an easy grader?
Probably so.
That's how David got a C. Dr. Stein, how about you? What are you teaching?
I'm teaching one research course with engineers on hurricane preparedness and evacuation, which is funded by the city's Office of Emergency Management, and another course on campaigns and elections. We're doing research on this mayor's race and the polling I'm doing on the upcoming or now soon-to-be over mayor's race.
I see you guys on television a lot. I think, Dr. Murray, you're on Channel 2, NBC. We won't talk about these other stations. You on another.
Channel 13. Yeah.
Channel 13. Well, see there.
And 11, if I have
11, to be fair.
I feel I have to do the same.
But I guess what I'm asking is, do you take sides in campaigns? Do you do polling? Do you actually get involved and as members of campaign teams? And if so, how would you assess your track record?
I used to work in the 80s in political campaigns, mostly for Democrats, occasionally for a Republican. But I've taken the 12-step recovery program. It's worked so far. I talk to any candidate, and I speak to many of them. But I don't charge consulting fees, and I don't work for a campaign. But I like to stay close to them because you find out some things, and I think it enriches the opportunity in the classroom because you have a perspective that's based on field, real-world events, and reading books and articles and journals doesn't quite get you there.
And you have a few politicians in elected office that have taken your courses, haven't you?
Probably 15 or 20, like the Dean of the Senate, John Whitmire, was a student of mine in 1971. When suddenly we looked at the redistricting map, and he figured he could win a House seat, and that launched his political career.
So now we know who to talk to when things go badly. Yes.
I basically drink at the same trough. I don't work on campaigns. I do vote, and I have preferences. I talk to all candidates who query me. I do have a son-in-law that just finished a campaign on Gene Locke's campaign, and I generally disclose that when I talk. Whether my station does or not is their business. But no, I don't work for candidates in any professional capacity, other than they often come when we release polls, and we will go over the poll results with them.
All right, so we're here. We're in late December. Christmas is coming. We're in the middle of filing for the 2010 party primaries. Do you anticipate any surprises on who files and who doesn't for the political parties?
Well, we've had 4 declared Republican candidates that have indicated they're going to run for governor. Of course, the Senator, Kay Bailey Hutchison, who has decided to keep her Senate seat, but as she's perfectly entitled to do while she's running for governor. The governor's obviously seeking re-election. Debbie Medina, a party activist, running, and Mr. Kilgore, who's not well known, also in the race. I don't think any other significant Republicans are going to enter the race, although there's 2 weeks to go until filing closes. But the Democratic field has been more fluid. It's been something of a vacuum, and better-known Democrats like John Sharp and Bill White talked for all through 2009 about running for the Senate. But you know, the declared Democratic candidates for governor, like Mr. Shammy here in Houston, a local, very wealthy candidate. Kiki Friedman, not going to run as an independent. Now he's a Democrat. Tom Schieffer, the brother of the newsman. None are particularly strong candidates. So the Democratic field is still pretty fluid, in my judgment.
Well, Dr. Stein, can the Democrats win the governorship in 2010?
I think they need a candidate, and I think clearly Bill White is the most logical candidate should he decide not to run for the Senate, either because there isn't a Senate seat to run for. The senator has announced she won't resign until at least March. We don't know if even then she would resign. But clearly Bill White, I think, was the best shot, and more than likely is getting a lot of pressure to run for that seat, in part because without somebody like Bill White at the top of the ticket, there simply won't be a ticket, and down-ballot races for state legislative offices will suffer, and so will county races for judges. And I think you could easily see a complete reversal of fortunes from what happened in 2008. Now, I think Bill White is the person who's probably getting the most careful look, and I'm sure he's himself thinking very strongly about whether or not he should be running for the governor. If Kay Bailey does not succeed in defeating Rick Perry in the primary, and many think that's a very good chance that Rick Perry will succeed in the primary, then Rick Perry is not what I would call a very popular vote getter. Last time he ran, of course, he was not a majority candidate. He had 38% of the vote. Many think that Bill White runs with the same kind of constituency that's behind Kay Bailey Hutchinson, sort of centrist Democrats, moderate Republicans, conservative Democrats, and could conceivably not only beat Rick Perry, but do it with a very broad base of a bipartisan coalition.
And Dr. Murray, I've heard there's polling that was done by Bill White last year, and they determined if Kay Bailey Hutchinson was the nominee for the Republicans, he couldn't win, but if Rick Perry was, he could. Does that jive with what you've been seeing and
I haven't done any polling, but that's my common sense interpretation, that she would be a much more difficult candidate, particularly for Bill White, to run against in November than Rick Perry. Rick Perry is a very good campaigner in my judgment, but as governor he's almost systematically alienated different constituencies that normally are conservative and Republican, like rural folks who didn't like the Trans-Texas Corridor, medical doctors when he vetoed their faster payment bill. So a credible Democratic gubernatorial nominee would have a pretty good chance against the incumbent governor. Very, very difficult, though, I think, to defeat Senator Hutchinson if she's the Republican.
So there's a political risk here if Bill White decides to switch. I mean, it doesn't mean he can't run for the Senate later if things don't work out for him and running for governor, obviously, if that Senate race is put off. But it's very interesting. The way I look at the 2010 cycle for the Democrats, I describe it as it could accelerate the switch in Texas by a decade. That is, a strong Democratic candidate for governor who wins, and probably wins means the Democrats take the House of Representatives in Austin, means that the whole cycle, and then we got redistricting in 2012, so all the dominoes start kicking over, and then suddenly this is not a red state or a blue state, it's a purple state.
Where's the Hispanic candidate for governor or high office on the Democratic side that could lead this transformation that Gary's talking about? Other than Henry Cisneros, I hear no one mentioned.
They're probably in college right now, so we're probably looking at a candidate.
In your classes, probably.
We hope. I'm one of my students. I don't have the pedigree.
We have an interesting leadership gap in the Texas Hispanic population. In the 1990s, you had three pretty prominent rising Democrats: Henry Cisneros, Dan Morales, Lincoln Guerrero. Mr. Guerrero's dead. Dan Morales went to prison. Henry Cisneros got entangled in a personal scandal and damaged him, and has since made a lot of money, but now re-entered politics. And nobody really stepped up into the gap. We have a lot of rising younger Hispanics, but they're not yet at the level of being credible statewide candidates. And that's very interesting that we had such a vacuum, because this is such a fast-growing population in our state.
What I don't understand is about the Republican primary is how it is that Rick Perry, who has alienated these constituencies, who has national media attention that really, identifies him as a bumpkin, really, a secessionist bumpkin, and yet this guy keeps winning. What is it? Is this Republican primary voter and the Republican primary, broadly speaking, now a party of Palinites?
Well,
is he's smarter than the rest of us because he knows who's there?
Well, he said, at one point in the past, I don't care what the general electorate thinks, I'm worried about the Republican primary. And let's quickly, a 20-second primer, 13 million registered voters. About 4.5 million people in a presidential election vote for the Republican. The average primary vote lately, 600,000 to 800,000. Most Republicans don't vote in Republican primaries. The smaller number who do are much more representative of strong social conservatives with very deeply held religious values. And the governor's managed to stay in pretty good stead with those folks, which makes him a very tough primary candidate, not especially strong necessarily in the general election.
Actually, we're about to go into the field in about a month doing some new survey work on this election because it's so unusual. we estimate there are about 620,000 primary Republican voters. And you can see these names. They're now available to anybody who wants them. They're public. And you can annotate them under the new federal law, Help America Vote Act. And we've looked at them. And they are overwhelmingly non-Texan. By that I mean this, that if Texas is no longer a majority white state, which we are not anymore among adults, the 620,000 likely Republican primary voters have two characteristics. They're over 50 and they're Anglo. That's a core. For my estimates are that for Kay Bailey Hutchinson to have a chance to beat Rick Perry in that kind of election, she'd have to raise the number of voters from 620 to at least 700, more likely 750,000 votes. It can happen, but you're going to be bringing into that electorate, that primary electorate, many Democrats, conservative Democrats, people who like Kay Bailey Hutchinson and would have voted for her and have voted for her many times in the last 16 years. It's unlikely that if Democrats aren't going to turn out for their own primary, they're not going to come over. The other interesting story here, and you talk about Bill White, if you go to their websites, Bill White and Kay Bailey Hutchinson, and you take off their titles, Bill White for Texas, Kay Bailey for whatever, you see 5 bullet issues, and they're bullet issues that are just attacks on Rick Perry, on everything from schools, education policies, tax policies. It looks like these two candidates are really running as sort of companions, and they are. I think Bill White knows that if he has a chance of winning a Senate seat in a special election, he needs the same voters that Kay Bailey has. And if we have a March primary with maybe a June runoff, that overlaps with the May special election, should Kay Bailey Hutchinson anticipate resigning at some point. Without a resignation, I think Bill White has to make a very tough choice, and it's something that Gary said. He's looking at polls, and he's saying to himself, can Kay Bailey Hutchinson beat Rick Perry? He's going to make that decision the next couple of weeks, if he hasn't in his own mind, made it already. I would have to bet that Kay Bailey Hutchinson is probably not a likely winner, and she surely isn't the winner she's forced into a runoff, because this whole strategy of bringing out more voters is the hardest thing to do. And if you have to do it in a general, it's hard. But if you have to do it in a primary runoff, it's even harder. And my guess is that she's looking at a really tough race. And there's no evidence at this point that this campaign is gelled together for these 620,000 hardcore, white, older Republican voters. And I think that's our problem.
I think we'll get a dramatic increase in Republican turnout in 2010. First, this is a historic race. I don't know of any other time in the history of the Republican Party, certainly not in Texas and not in any other state, the senior senator from the state in Washington runs against the sitting governor. That just doesn't happen very often. It almost happened in California in 1958, but the senator decided he would run for governor, and he got the governor to switch and run for the Senate. But a head-on collision between the most visible Republican office holders in the state, that many Republicans like both, we don't have any track record for this. But I think it's going to produce darn good turnout. For one thing, they're going to spend probably $30 million, which should drive voter interest up very substantially. And the Republican will be favored in November, so the stakes are high. And these two candidates don't like each other much. And they'll mix it up. And I think it will generate significant voter interest. Just think, if only 10% of the electorate votes in the primary, that's 1.3 million voters.
That's an astounding increase, but then the turnout is, that's when you get down to it, such a small percentage of voters are actually picking when the primaries were picking the office holders.
I think that, the danger here is that, and again, for candidates like Bill White or even John Sharp, we've not mentioned that he, of course, is announced for the Senate. He might start looking at this governor's race. I think both candidates would prefer to run for governor. The really interesting question is, do they look at that? They have to make that decision early on. If there's a Democratic primary with substantial candidates, either Bill White or John Sharp, then I think that idea of the turnout may go up, but it won't go up in the Republican primary. For Kay Bailey Hutchinson to have, I think, a better than even chance here, she needs well over 750,000 Republican primary voters, which is very doable if there's nothing going on the Democratic side.
So the Democrats don't really have serious players running for governor, as you said. Then she's got a chance to
then all the action's over on the Republican
So let's
side.
talk about them. Let's talk about the Democrats. I'm tired of talking about the Republicans.
I know you are.
Dr. Murray brings up 1958, so we now can have some historical references now to permit us to show off a little bit on our side. But the last time that I saw the first time I saw a nationalized non-presidential election in Texas was 1978 when Bill Clements swept out John Hill and a lot of people lost. Are the Republicans counting on nationalizing the election in 2010 with some Obama fervor And if so, what do you what is the Democrats' counter strategy to that? So is it just pass a lot of bills and hope for the best, or just start going small bore? Bill Clinton. We're just going to pick a few things and show that we can govern.
Well, I think the Democrats really are very conscious of 1994. When in the second year of the Bill Clinton Democratic administration, they got pounded in the midterm elections and lost control of the Senate and the House and never regained them during the Clinton presidency. So I think that's foremost in their mind. Don't get in the position they were in 14, 16 years ago. Barack Obama is a more popular first-term president than Bill Clinton. He's likely to avoid personal misconduct issues, but he's pursuing an extremely aggressive legislative agenda that has drawn tremendous fire here in Texas from many conservative and some moderate voters. It's a high-risk election for Democrats. I agree with the general consensus of analysts that 2010 will be somewhere between a pretty good year for Republicans and a very good year for Republicans. Now, how that'll filter down into things like the Texas governor's race, not sure until we see what the matchup of candidates are. But it looks like the usual pattern that the midterms for a new administration are a tough election round, and the tilt of the field seems to be favoring Republicans going into 2010.
But Bob Stein, the other part of my long question was, what is the Democratic strategy to avoid that? Well, is it passing the big ticket items and bragging, or is it just kind of going low under the radar?
There are two things that Dick said. I think the first one's very important. Democrats picked up a lot of marginal seats. There's as many as 13 House seats and probably about closer to 30 of those seats that they probably were picking up that they really were not expected to win. That kind of late-breaking exuberance for Barack Obama. So my sense is that, midterm correction, you throw in there the second factor, which is a bad economy. Will the economy in the next several months pick up so that voters now start feeling like there's a recovery? My guess is we might see the stock market doing better, but I'm not certain unemployment's going to be down substantially to make voters feel comfortably nationally. So I tend to agree with Dick. I think the Democrats can hold on to the House. The Senate's a little bit more difficult. There is more seats up than normally because of some of these special elections, like in the Massachusetts. No, I don't think the Democrats are going to lose that seat, but I think they could lose Arkansas. They can lose Louisiana. Probably not, but Arkansas looks like a seat that could be easy. It's Blanchard Lincoln. That's not a race that even the Democrats feel good about. So I think what happens here in Texas, however, is not nationalized. One, we're not going into the recession as badly as the rest of the country. Two, Texas politics are going to be pretty much defined, as I think Dick said, by an interesting race for certain between Kay Bailey and Rick Perry, and we just don't know what's on the Democratic side yet. So my guess is that the real issue here in Texas is really what the Democrats do down ballot. I think it's conceivable the Democrats could do rather poorly on a down ballot race, not only for county judges like we had in 2008, but most importantly, I think, the state legislature. This is a redistricting year, and the Democrats need a good top of the ticket. And right now, there's no evidence that we have anybody at the top of the ticket. I think Barbara Radnowski is the only one with statewide experience, and she ran even behind what most would think is a normal Democratic vote. So right now, I think a lot of state representatives are worrying that 2-seat majority that the Republicans have could grow to 8, 9, maybe 10 seats. Then the redistricting game is over, and the Democrats are really hurting for 10 more years, because when you draw those boundaries, that's it. It also has an effect on recruiting Hispanic candidates. There's several state senators and state reps like Raymond in the Valley who had thought maybe of even running for a House seat, but they didn't. They wanted to hold on to what they had. If redistricting doesn't give the Democratic Party some hope for moving up in the Senate even, you're going to see a generation of Hispanic candidates, if they even emerge, as holding back for 10 more years. And that's a real problem. So to me, these are really local affairs. Nationally, Democrats probably lose seats in both the House and Senate, but I don't think they lose either of those two bodies. The real question, I think, still is, tell me where the economy is. Voters vote their pocketbooks. Everything else, yes. Global warming, energy, it's their pocketbooks. My guess is this is going to be a good recovery, but not unemployment is not going down dramatically, and voters are going to be looking at Obama that way.
How does that translate into what's going to happen in Harris County in 2010?
Well, we'll have the longest ballot in the country because we've got all these judges, and every judge spot is going to have a Democrat and a Republican running for it this time around. So, of course, most of us won't bother to look. We'll just vote the straight ticket and get the hell out of there. But,
which sounds like it's something about judicial selection, doesn't it, Dr. Murray?
Yes.
But would you say that Jerry Bernberg is right in his position that if he fills all of those positions for judge, even though he may have a weak gubernatorial candidate, even though he may have no one running for county judge, that he can still prevail down ballot?
I have no idea. I don't think the down ballot races will be as good for Democrats as they were in 2008, but how much worse will they be? It's unknowable. The status of the national administration, who's the gubernatorial matchup, can the candidates raise enough money to put together a campaign aimed at that maybe 10% of the voters who do go down and cherry pick? I think the cherry pickers will probably get a chance to elect a few people on each side. My guess would be we won't see a party sweep. If we do, it's more likely to be Republican than Democratic. But my top-of-the-head guess 10 months before the election to the judicial candidates is run hard. A few hundred votes may separate you from your opponent, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican.
In the last week, there's been some information, last few weeks, some information has kind of dribbled out that Rick Perry's eye is really not on getting reelected as to governor, but to run for president against Obama in 2012. Any reaction to that, Dr. Stein?
I think he has a hard enough time getting reelected in Texas. Hard to believe that a national party would pick even an incumbent governor, should he prevail against Kay Bailey and even any of the Democrats, who probably will not be getting an overwhelming majority, and in his last election was 38. No, I think he's probably more of a stalking horse for someone like Sarah Palin and for that wing of the party, but I think Rick Perry would be wise to probably be happy with being governor of Texas.
I think it's a little awkward to talk about seceding from a country and then run to be president of it. I don't expect that to happen. I think after his governorship, Rick Perry might be interested in being president, but more likely president of Texas A&M University.
Am I wrong in thinking that the political parties that we have here in the state of Texas and Harris County are probably stronger as party organizations than we have ever known? Is that an evaluation you share?
Well, the Republican Party, I think, has been a pretty well-organized party since the 1960s. The Democrats have waxed and waned. They're on the upswing now. But, yeah, this is, of course, the third largest county in the country. And unlike the other two big counties, Los Angeles and Cook, we're very competitive politically between Democrats and Republicans. So, yeah, we have strong parties here in the Houston area because there's a lot at stake, particularly here because we elect everybody, including all of our judges.
You know, you both talked about the vast number of registered voters in Texas, the small turnouts for primaries, small turnout for general elections, even for the presidency. What is it about all those registered voters that they don't turn out? Millions and millions of people don't bother. So they're happy with everything, or they're apathetic?
He sounded like Ralph Yarbrough then.
Well, actually, I mean, the truth is we're not altogether different than the rest of the country. And the second is there are states and venues that have higher turnout for a number of good reasons, not the least of which is competitive races among partisans. We've not seen that, but when we did see it, we see high turnout. The other, I think, is that we have a mode of voting in Texas that probably doesn't encourage people to vote. States like Colorado, for instance, have a wide range, including permanent mail-in voting, which I think in Texas we'll get. They have these vote centers on Election Day. Early voting has always been a boom, but it doesn't actually help people vote who don't know who they're voting for. And so early voting tends to help partisans, activists, and longtime voters. I think something else that should be mentioned here, and it often gets lost, is county government. We have 4 county commissioners. Each of them now will represent a district that's made up of 1 million people. We're 4 million in Harris County as of months ago when the American Community Survey came out. Each one of these commissioners is judge, legislator, chief executive. They have an organization that ranges from about 350 to maybe 500 people, and they're partisans, all elected by a partisan ballot. And it's legitimate for their partisan employees to take a day off, as many of the candidates do, and work for their respective candidates, whoever they may be. That is a big party organization. One of Dick Murray's former colleagues, Jim Gibson, wrote a book with some other people on county party organizations. Harris County, this is an old study, admittedly, ranked very high in terms of level of organization, discipline, and effectiveness in turning out votes. So we forget about county government. We always think about the city, we talk about the state, and we kind of overlook the county. But the county, and these 4 commissioners will represent constituencies that will rank them among the 12 largest cities in the country. Each of them will be
Amazing.
bigger than about 6 states.
So do we need more
Not big
commissioners?
states.
Do we need more commissioners?
I'm not arguing that. I'm just simply saying you ought to pay much more attention to what the county does. It's much more important than we realize, and its partnership with the city can be much more vital to us in terms of our overall regional economic growth, transportation, health, and policy.
In our last minute, I have an off-the-wall question for you. Start with Dick Murray. Barack Obama, probably a one-term president?
Probably not. 3/4 of presidents who seek re-election win, so statistically, re-election is easier than defeating an incumbent president. He's also a very talented campaigner and unlikely to be dogged with personal scandal. He could be undone by a twofer. The other things that undo presidents are a bad economy on their watch. He inherited a lot of problems, but some of the blame for sure is going to attach to him if there's still difficulty in 2012, and involvement in a long-running foreign war that doesn't seem to be going anywhere. There's risk, but I think he gets reelected.
You got 10 seconds to
The only
agree or
thing that
not.
will hurt him is the internal Democratic Party politics. What killed Jimmy Carter in his re-election a bit was that he got challenged by Ted Kennedy over substantive issues. I think the war issue could hurt Obama if he doesn't solve it.
Thank you, guys.
Very good. Thank you.
It's been great having you. You can view tonight's discussion along with a follow-up with Gary and I by going to HoustonPBS.org and check out Red, White, and Blue at that site. And until next time, get informed and get active.